Hi guys, this is just a quick kind of update on the previous Ball Lightning build I did, and it's the build I've currently been using to do the Abbatoire of Zir dungeon that was released yesterday. There aren't that many changes with the previous build, mainly just a key passive swap, some Paragon glyph changes, and a few aspect shifts. There'll be a planner in the description below as usual, as well as a link to the previous build. So let's get to it. So starting with the skill tree, it's basically the same as the last one. So we have 2 in Firebolt, 1 in Potent Warding, Chain Lightning with all the nodes and getting Destructive Chain Lightning, 1 in Devastation, 3 in Elemental Dominance, Flame Shield with Mystical Flame Shield, Teleport with Shimmering Teleport, 3 in Glass Cannon, 1 in Elemental Attunement, 1 into Ice Armor to get to the Mystical Ice Armor,
Greetings.
1 in Frost Nova to get to the Mystical Frost Nova. Then we go here to Ice Blades and go for the Summoned Ice Blades. 1 in Align the Elements just so we can get to the 3 in Mana Shield and the 3 in Protection. Then we come down to our Mastery skills. We're obviously going to get 5 into Ball Lightning and then go for Wizard's Ball Lightning. Then we take 1 in Static Discharge and 3 in Invigorating Conduit. So then we come down here, get 1 into Coursing Currents, 3 in Electrocution, and 2 into Conduction. So the main change is we are not taking Esu's Ferocity, as we are taking Vir's Mastery, so we're going to want that for the close enemies taking 15% increased damage from our shock skills, which may or may not work at the moment, and deal 20% less damage to you. So that's the part we want there, the damage reduction. So let's move on to the Paragon board. The main changes here is we are not using Flame Feeder at the moment, as we are using the Tears of Blood unique glyph, which we get from the Abbatoire of Zir. So for the starting board, we have Charge still. Then we come up to our second board, Enchantment Master, and we're going to put in the Control glyph here. Third board, which is the Ceaseless Conduit board. This is where I'm putting the Tears of Blood for now. And as you can see, for every 5 core stats purchased within the range, we gain an extra 2% increased damage. Then we go up to the fourth board here, which is Frigid Fate, and as before, we are putting the Adept glyph in here. For the fifth board, we are taking the Burning Instinct board, and we're going to put Destruction in here just like before. But we are going to make sure we take Safeguard as a rare node this time, so we're getting that extra 13% damage reduction from Elite, and we're getting a bit more from the magic nodes around it, as well as some armor. Then for our sixth board, the same, Searing Heat, and we're going to put the Exploit glyph in here, so that's just giving us a bunch of vulnerable damage. And for our seventh and final board, the Static Surge board, we are putting in the Territorial glyph, so just an extra 15% damage reduction against close enemies, and some damage to close enemies. So that pretty much wraps up the Paragon board. Next up, the Enchantments. So Enchantments, same as before, we're taking the Chain Lightning enchantment, and then we're also going to take the Firebolt enchantment to apply some burning damage, as well as get an extra stack for our Rashes. So for the Vampiric powers, we're going to be using Prey on the Weak, Metamorphosis, Ravenous, Accursed Touch or Domination. At the moment I'm using Accursed Touch, and Infection. So Infection is going to inflict pox on the enemy, and when you inflict pox 8 times on an enemy, you deal poison damage, so this is getting us another stack for Rashes. So now we'll go through the gear, and on the left I'll list the affixes from best to worst, in my opinion. So for the Helm, we're going to look for Total Armor, Cooldown Reduction, Max Life, and all stats. If you can't get that, then look for Intelligence or Crowd Control Duration or Life on Kill. As for the aspect, you're going to want to use Ever Living, so you will take 25% less damage from crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. Or if you have a Shaco, then you would use that in place of this. So for the chest piece, we're going to look for total armor %, damage reduction from close, damage reduction from distant, and damage reduction. If you can't get that, then look for max life, all stats, or damage. And as for the aspect, we're going to look for the Mage Lord's aspect here, and that's going to give us our Zir's Mastery key passive. Will be able to grant us 9% damage reduction for each close enemy, up to 27%. For the gloves, we're going to be looking for crit chance, attack speed, lightning critical strike damage, and all stats. If you can't get that, then look for crit chance against injured, intelligence, or lucky hit % chance to restore primary resource. As for the aspect, we are going to be using gravitational, and that's going to let our ball lightning orbit around us and deal 15 to 25%, depending on your roll, increased damage. Next up we have the pants, and we're going to use Tybalt's Will. Not much else needs to be said. If you're attempting Abbatoire of Zir, you probably have a load of these, so just want to make sure you look for one with good rolls. And for the boots, we're using Esu's Heirloom. Again, look for good rolls. Next up we have the weapon, so we're going to want to look for a dagger. And for the affixes, we'll be looking for all stats, mastery skill damage, vulnerable damage, and damage to close. If you can't get that, then look for critical strike damage or intelligence. As for the aspect, we're going to be putting on Storm Swirl here, so we will deal an extra 21 to 30% increased damage to vulnerable while we have a barrier. Next up we have the amulet, and so we're going to be looking for total armor here. Ranks into glass cannon, ranks into mastery skills, or ranks into devouring blaze. And as for the aspect, we're going to be putting disobedience on here. So we're going to put this on here to get the maximum amount of increased armor, which is 1.7% increased armor for 4 seconds when we do any form of damage, stacking up to 99%. So that is a huge armor increase, and we deal an unbelievable amount of instances of damage with this build, so it stacks very easily, making us really tanky. Next up, the rings. For our first ring, we're going to be using something with critical strike chance, vulnerable damage, close damage, and resource generation. If you can't get that, then look for crit damage or max life. And as for the aspect, we're looking for accelerating, so critical strikes with core skills increase our attack speed by 25% in my case. So we're not using a core skill on the bar, of course, but we do use the Chain Lightning enchantment, so that is going to be critically striking all the time, so this aspect will be working all of the time. As another note for the ring, if you can get something with poison or shadow resistance, then definitely go for that, as your other resistances are pretty well off. For our second ring, obviously, we'll be using Rasha's Iridescent Loop, and we're using this for the unique aspect, so for each type of elemental damage we deal, gain 13.5% in my case, increased damage for 4 seconds. And it's easy to get that stacked to 4 with Ice Blades, Chain Lightning, Firebolt Enchant, and the Infection Vampiric power. So that's basically always going to be on 4 stacks. Last but not least, we have the Focus, and we're going to be looking for something with highest item power as possible, just like the weapon for the high base damage. And then for the affixes, we'll look for critical strike chance, mana cost reduction, resource generation, and cooldown reduction. If you can't get those, then look for all stats and intelligence. And as for the aspect, we're going to be using Conceited, so we'll deal an extra 25%, in my case, increased damage, while we have a barrier active. So that pretty much wraps it up for the gear. And as for the gems, we have green in the offhand and main hand, red in the armor, and skulls in the jewelry. So as you can see, we have a good amount of attack power, great amount of armor, decent life, and fairly good resistances as well. Could be a little bit better, but not too bad overall. Enough to get us through the early tiers of the Abbatoire without much problems. So that pretty much wraps it up for the build. If you enjoyed the video or learned something from this build, please consider liking and subscribing, as it helps the channel a lot. Now I guess I'm off to find some more sigil powder, because those glyphs cost an insane amount of sigil powder to make. Thanks again for watching. Bye.